So guys, I want to do a bunch of videos today, and one of the first videos I want to talk about is AJ Styles retiring, because I didn't put it down on my to-do list, but this is a very, very important video for me. That AJ Styles was actually probably the first wrestler that I've actually was very emotionally invested in. And like honestly too, I wish I met the guy. And I think that quite honestly, he makes me very emotional. Like I love AJ Styles as, a fan really, because quite honestly, I went through a lot of hard times in my life. And when I always saw AJ Styles, he always reminded me of myself really. Because when he was in TNA wrestling, he was always that hard worker. He was always that phenomenal one. And he was always that person that took a lot of shit from that company. He was not, like as I said, the biggest slap in the face was the fact that he was never in the TNA Hall of Fame. And it would have been right if he was the first person there. The same way, people are talking about Swerve Strickland possibly retiring. And I think there's a speculation Swerve Strickland might retire from wrestling, or he might not be able to continue if after surgery. If that's the case and they do a Hall of Fame, there's a huge conversation to put Swerve Strickland in the AEW Hall of Fame first over somebody like Chris Jericho, who's had a career more so in WWE. When you look at the AEW, when you look at the TNA Hall of Fame, it was really a slap in his face that they put Sting in first. And obviously, we understand why that was. It was because of politics, and it was also because they wanted to put Sting in the TNA Hall of Fame first, just to give a middle finger to WWE, saying, hey, you know what? We got him first, really. And Sting even said he wanted AJ Styles in there first or as well, really, because that's what they wanted, really. So when I see AJ Styles, he was always that person that I felt represented a lot of people who busted their asses, who did phenomenal things in their life, and they never, ever stood out really. So that's what I liked about him. He always kept on going, but that was also a very human thing really. And a lot of wrestlers represent something. A lot of wrestlers who resonate with people represent the human condition really. Like when we look at people like The Undertaker, he represents, that feeling that we all have to wish to be all powerful. When we look at somebody like the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, baby, we look at somebody who wants to take life, very fun and stuff like that. When we look at Stone Cold Steve Austin, he's a wrestler that we all resonate with, because sometimes we have anger and we want to express our anger. When we see a person like John Cena, he's two different people. In one way, he is a superhero. We all wish we can be all powerful. We wish that we can be a champion. And then on the other side, we wish we can always overcome. So he's ultimately, David and Goliath at the same time, really. But with AJ Styles, he resonated with a lot of people because a lot of people had that, and that's a very American thing, really, to work your ass off, to bust your ass, and never really get that far. But sometimes in those rare opportunities of life, you touch the impossible. For example, like Jeff Hardy in 2008 was an excellent example. Like there's a lot of people who said he would never be a WWE champion because the company liked Big Ben for the longest time, really. And he also had drug issues, and also he had very colorful hair. So he was a very nonconformist type of champion. So when he became champion, it moved people. It moved me, because a lot of people didn't think that's going to happen, really. So all these wrestlers kind of resonate with me, but also a lot of people, and AJ Styles is in that group. He resonated with people because, to just give your best, really, to do the Styles Clash, to have all those matches, to be in the biggest moments of TNA history, really, and then just not to be in the Hall of Fame first, to be always pushed up to the back burner, to be a draw, really, and always just kind of being, you're just really a phenomenal tool, really. They really treated him like a tool, really. Whenever they need AJ Styles to do something for the company, he was a company man, really. So it really, really hurt me when when they said the reason why he left was because they wanted to cut his pay. I think either 40% or 60%, and they're saying something like, we're gonna make you the TNA champion for a year, we're gonna put you in the Hall of Fame. But they did a CM Punk storyline. So a lot of people didn't know is that, let's say if his paycheck was $100,000, and now they say let's take a cut to $40,000. So what would happen is if that's roughly like $40,000, like $800 a week, really. So they did something like say, hey, you know what, you're going to be this champion that goes to other companies and wrestles for like half a year, really. Then that means instead of 40,000, we'll pay you 20,000 because you're not on our television, really. And that's how they wanted to cut him. And then he just got out of there, and he had every right to do that. And one of the things that killed TNA wrestling was AJ Styles leaving, and it was ultimately because of the middle finger they gave him. And he went to New Japan Pro Wrestling, and I believe the story was I think he talked to Triple H and a few other people in WWE, and they're like, "Oh, before you come here, we want to see how you do at a more maybe a more professional company, or what would you do as a champion of a more professional company than TNA?" And then he did that, and then he debuted at the Royal Rumble. And he did very well in WWE. They gave him some titles, and there was actually a time when when he spent more days on the roster as a champion than not as a champion, and then eventually became the WWE champion. And what people don't know about him is that he and Macho Man Randy Savage both tie in their WWE championship reign. They both have like around 530 days, really. And he's one of I think maybe around 10 or 15 wrestlers that have held the WWE championship for more than a year, really. So, he's definitely very accomplished, and he's actually going to go down in history as being the last person at a WrestleMania event that The Undertaker faced, really. And, and also, too, sadly, it was the Boneyard match when in front of nobody, really, when that's like a sad way for The Undertaker to go out, really. But, they did the best they could with that, and I respect that. But the point of it is that, that he's done a hell of a lot to professional wrestling. And one of the big draws, and I respect him for that, was that when TNA Wrestling had Slammiversary, he decided to go back. They drew 8,000 people, but one of the other big draws to the Slammiversary show was AJ Styles coming back, and and I respect him for that. One thing I was not happy with is that they should have had him. They should have had him and Leon Slater at the at AEW Bound for Glory, because that would have been right for him to have a match there. But I think next year they're going to have a match with him. And I would like to see him become the TNA champion, have maybe the last run with it. But I understand if they don't do that, because sometimes that's not good luck when you give your heavyweight titles to other people. Because the last thing that he wants to do is become, just like Bully Ray or somebody else, where he's like, okay, well, I'm going to go to this company, I'm going to take this title and repeat history, really, when that's just not a way to do that. If he has a match with Mike Santana at Slammiversary, and then maybe a rematch at Bound for Glory, and that's kind of his, TNA retirement done right, and then, that'll be something, really. But I think that I'm also kind of, I think we're all blessed, and I'm blessed, and he's blessed, that I think that TNA has a working relationship with WWE, and there's so much money that TNA is making that Carlos would make the right decision to say, hey, you know what? One of the things that has angered people about TNA wrestling, one of the things that turned off people, was how AJ Styles was treated through his career in TNA, and how it ended. And Carlos has the right to do well. And if he really wants people to look at TNA as the alternative to AEW, one way to do that is to send AJ Styles with the right ending of TNA, because he left with the middle finger. And like I said before, one of the reasons why I did a AI of Hulk Hogan kissing Chris Benoit in hell is because one of the reasons why Hulk Hogan is burning in hell right now is that he destroyed TNA wrestling, And Eric Bischoff's going to go down to hell with him because he also destroyed it too. And Dixie Carter for a couple of months, because she destroyed TNA wrestling. And one of the ways they destroyed it was really just shitting on AJ Styles. They took an R. Kelly level shit on him. But as I said, really, it really hurts me very, very deeply. And that's a wound that will never really heal. And that's a wound that a lot of people will never forgive, is how TNA just disrespected this guy who has done so much, really. You even saw that promo he did with Jeff Hardy where, he was saying things like, Jeff Hardy, I've been in this company since day one. I had more matches than anybody's had. And you gave TNA a bad name, and you almost destroyed the whole thing because you decided to go on television and get drunk, really. And I understand he was not doing that to be an asshole. He was doing to give him a reality check. And And then also too, as some people said, he was trying to be the father of Jeff Hardy, just to be like, this is just a reality check, because of what you did, really. And and he was always in that. And as I said, and I know I'm speaking in circles, but he was always in that boat of just doing whatever he could for TNA. But he's had really great matches, like the Destination X match. He and Christopher Daniels was great. One of the, I mean, like honestly, like the whole like gimmick he had when he was, when you didn't know if he was the phenomenal one or a bad guy, like when he had the hood and everything like that. That was when I started to like him the best, really. And when he kind of was talking to Dixie Carter about his feelings, when he did like the promo about saying, you know what, sometimes you work at a place that sucks, really, and you realize it's just a paycheck. But one thing I like about my job is I want to give all you fans, your money's worth. I like that because that's how he felt, really, and it's all great, really, So, like I said, he's in the right spot, really. I've not liked what he's done in WWE. I felt like, again, he became way too WWE, where they had him do stupid things like the phenomenal intercontinental suspect something, piss, or things like that. He did a lot of stupid things in WWE, really. And I don't really see him in WWE. I don't think he's lived up to his full potential. I've not watched a lot of his WWE matches, so I'll give you that, really. But if he was in AEW, imagine Will Ospreay and AJ Styles, or AJ Styles and Kenny Omega, or AJ Styles and Ricochet. Like, he would have had a lot, very memorable matches. But obviously, he's getting older, and he has to think about his health, really. And then also, Ospreay is out for like a year. He could retire young. Kenny Omega might retire soon. You have Hiroshi Tanahashi, who's retiring this year. You have Swerve, who may retire. So, if he was in AEW, as I said, he may do a 1 hour match with Bryan Danielson and be doing like, the Styles Clash or Spiral Tap off a balcony at Anarchy in the Arena or shit like that. So maybe it was for the better that he went to WWE, really. But definitely one of the greatest wrestlers that has ever lived. And like, as I said, like if you want the planet to explode, one of the ultimate dream matches of all time would be Shawn Michaels versus AJ Styles. Like, could you imagine the match that they would have and the piece of work that they would create, really? And as I said, if you took Will Ospreay and you put him in WWE, imagine the match that he would have with AJ Styles. Like, obviously, they would just say, okay, this will work. We can do a 40-minute, we can do a 60-minute match with you two, and we'll make it work way better than if he was in AEW, where it may feel like, a video game match going for like an hour, really. Because there are times when Will Ospreay, his matches feel like they go on a little bit longer than he needs to, and then there's times when he wrestles with people like Bryan Danielson, then you put it together a good match, really. But imagine, there's so many like what ifs with AJ Styles, really, about like all the great matches you could have. Imagine him and Macho Man or Ricky the Dragon Steamboat in the 80s if he was around during that time. Imagine, like I said, with all the matches he could have in AEW. Imagine all the matches he could have with people in the 90s. Like, imagine AJ Styles versus Bret Hart, AJ Styles versus Shawn Michaels, AJ Styles, versus, I don't know, like maybe like the Texas Tornado or the Von Erichs, like he's one of those wrestlers at any point in history, if he was wrestling, he would do great stuff. Imagine a 1990s Rey Mysterio versus AJ Styles. Imagine the match that they would have. Like, definitely he is the phenomenal one. He definitely will go down in history as one of the greatest professional wrestlers, And for the rest of my life, I will say that he's one of my favorite wrestlers. And wholeheartedly, as I said, like one of the biggest tragedies of my entire life would be two things. Number one, never meeting AJ Styles. Number two, never doing a video like this where I talk about how much I love AJ Styles as a professional wrestler. And I think the third thing that I would say, really, is that if he goes into the Hall of Fame and I'm not there, like that would be one of the biggest regrets of my entire life if I don't see him get put in there. And I also want to say, too, I know I've said this in a video before, that I struggled with suicidal thoughts over 10 years ago. I worked at a job that was robbed by some security guards. I developed PTSD. I dealt with workplace bullying. My family was very harsh on me to get a job. I was sexually harassed by some of my family by a family member. I had an ex-girlfriend almost destroy my entire life. So I really thought about, killing myself for many, many years. I don't feel that way anymore, but I want to be real with you guys for a minute. But I remember watching Destination X when Destination X for 2 years. I remember like one time it was Austin Aries getting the contract, and then another year was Austin Aries versus Bobby Roode. And I remember actually saying, after I watch, and I forget what show it was, but I think it was like in 2011, or something like that. I was like saying, after I watch the show, I'm going to commit suicide. But I didn't do that really. But I remember like how watching AJ Styles and watching everybody put that show together, watching Austin Aries, that motivated me not to commit suicide, And I would say this: Austin Aries was the person that helped me not commit suicide, and and then I would also say on that list of one of the people that prevented me from committing suicide was AJ Styles. Because, like I said, it really just said to me that when I looked at him, it really, really, really said to me that that there are people who give their fucking best in this world, and sometimes that's not respected. But there are times when that pays off, sometimes when there doesn't. But he was my guy, really, and to see his whole career turn out the way it is, like he goes down in history because of his match with the Undertaker. He goes down in history because he's been a WWE champion for over a year. He goes down in history because when you look at classic TNA, which always needs to be remembered, because there are two TNA wrestlings. There's the beginning to when Hulk Hogan, Dixie Carter, and Eric Bischoff fucked up the company. That is classic TNA wrestling. And then after that is when it got purchased. It was lost for a couple of years, and Carlos is now working with WWE, really. There's two TNA wrestlings. And the original one always has to be remembered. And if that gets forgotten, that's a damn tragedy, really. It's almost like forgetting. It's really almost forgetting that the light bulb was invented, because the iPhone's invented now. Really, you have to acknowledge all the history, really. But I want to say with him retiring, I would say if he feels it's right, it's okay. And if he wants to be around for his kids, that's good, not in a wheelchair. And like I said, he felt WWE's a better fit than, like I said, having hour-long matches with Swerve Strickland, being expected to do the spiral tap off a balcony onto Darby Allin in AEW, and I think that's what he learned. He learned to be a little bit selfish, not in a mean way, but in a way of, I got to care for myself. I got to care for my well-being. I got to watch my kids grow up, so if that's what he wants in life, then fuck everybody else. AJ Styles has to do what's best for AJ Styles, really. So, congratulations to the phenomenal one. I love you, AJ Styles. Like I said, the day he dies is going to be one of the saddest days of my entire life, but I love this man. And I met Dustin Rhodes, one of the happiest moments of my life. If I ever meet AJ Styles, it'll be one of the most happiest moments of my entire life, really. But, and as I said, I think that, and I'm very proud that I made the time to do this video. I really love that guy, AJ Styles. I'm holding back tears, really, as a man who just can't cry anymore. But I really love this guy. He represents so much to my own identity as a person, really. Just being that hard worker that puts his heart and soul in everything, and sometimes that's not appreciated, but you still got to be the phenomenal one, no matter where you go in life.